Which profession is full of people with bloated egos? Military wives are horrible. They post more shit on Facebook about deployments and hardships than any soldier I've ever known. Yeah, we get it. You were emotional because you sat at home while your husband was off getting shot at. Oh God. So the restaurant I work at has a military discount, but it only applies to active duty military members. One day, this bitch walks in and tries to use the fact that her husband is in active duty to get that discount, when the cashier told her, politely, that she wouldn't be able to get it, as it's against our policy. She starts screaming at the cashier that she serves as much, if not more than her husband, and the policy is stupid and she's never coming back. The cashier just looks at her and says, "Ma'am, my husband is in the army, and I know good and well that is utter bullshit. Please, never come back." After we broke up, my ex started dating a former army guy who served his 4 years and left. They met a year after his honorable discharge, and she snaked into his life as fast as she could. Almost immediately, she started posting about being an army wife, and even created a profile on militaryspouses.com. They dated for about 6 months, before she started complaining about his PTSD, like it was an inconvenience to her. I'll always remember her saying, "Sometimes I can't get any sleep, because he has nightmares." Like, really? Get over it already. I convinced her to leave him, but not for her sake. That poor guy already went through hell once. Some spouses, mainly women, of military personnel, get all high and mighty, and think the world should cater to them, because their spouse, not them, is serving in the military. Usually they're also horrible people, mooching off the benefits system, act like assholes to the reasonable military spouses, and try to sleep with anything in a uniform when their spouse gets deployed. Former military can confirm. I can't agree more. Chefs are so fucking full of themselves. I was a cook for 8 years, and when I started doing fine dining, I really started to notice how bad it is. Chefs feel like they are a god in the kitchen, and everyone below them is scum. The worst part, cooks go along with it. That's the main problem with the industry. These cooks see it as a rite of passage, and this is why cook wages are so low. If more cooks started demanding proper wages, safer work conditions, non-insane hours, some do 16 hours a day. I was lucky, only did 14-hour ones at most, and once in a while, actual fucking breaks, vacation time, and not being treated like shit by a dictator chef. 100%. My boyfriend is a musician, and to be fair, some of them don't have any ego whatsoever. They are there to play, enjoy themselves, and entertain others. These are always my favorites. They don't have to be the best in the world for me to appreciate them. They just have to have some talent and be a good guy. On the other hand, some musicians think they're just God's gift to the world. They are complete narcissists and can't even tell that they are completely talentless. They will throw other artists, band members under the bus at any opportunity to attempt to make themselves look better. If they're messing up on stage, it's the drummer's fault, or the bassist's fault, or the guitar player's fault, or the sound guy wasn't up to their standards, or the crowd were a bunch of retards since they didn't like the music. Musicians can be either the best people, or the absolute worst. There is very little middle ground, from my knowledge. Grew up steeped in the Christian music world. The egos, such egos. I have had the privilege of working in both investment banking and the startup industry. Both industries are hugely inflated by the bloated egos of their people. However, broadly speaking, the startup egos are infinitely more insufferable than the finance egos. So let's start with them. Most startup egos are just unreal. The grounded startup bro is an unfortunate minority, and that person often eschews obsessively identifying as a startup guy anyway. From founder to intern, most startup egos are absolutely fucking deluded. These egos are so massive that if you shipped them all into some quadrant of space, we would witness the creation of a fucking singularity that would Big Bang itself into a whole new universe of masturbatory self-aggrandization. Everyone is a CEO, everyone is a head of X. Everyone else is a chief vision officer, digital warrior, CEO rockstar, or ninja developer. I cannot believe that I never ran into Cthulhu, high priest of the great old ones. What the fuck? In any case, they are all going to disrupt disruption. By building the Uber of disruption, it'll be a disruptive on-demand marketplace for disruption. Translation: my startup does banal shit. It has not actually done anything innovative, and possibly even reinvented the wheel, yet managed to raise money on the back of marketing. Ample, Soylent, Herbalife for Silicon Valley, except Herbalife actually has $1 billion F despite ups and downs. I joined a startup as a head of X, and was blown away at not just the incompetence of the entire leadership team, despite having had previous exits, but the genuine lack of self-knowledge on this front. When I quit, the CEO tried to convince me that if I stayed, I could do whatever I wanted. Needed to improve things. I suppressed the urge to tell him that improving things would entail firing him, and replacing him with someone who understood the concept of runway and burn, was capable of prioritizing a discussion about product, over building a climbing wall into a new office, and that investors did not give us millions to just fucking piss away on PR and team photo shoots. The only thing I regret about quitting is not quitting sooner. That was bad judgment on my part. To be fair, I genuinely respect and admire this subset of people, not just because of their lack of ego, but because they are usually building something truly impressive. Now for finance. The senior rainmakers in finance have usually all amassed enough gaseous ego that if you put them in some quadrant of space together, they would condense into a fucking Death Star. But the rest, not so much, despite the dick swinging, bonus hefting, frat bro, fist bump, masters of the universe veneer. Deep down there is the mutual acknowledgement among finance brothers that they just move money around, they don't create it. A lot of the bluster is also a conscious act. The macho, douchebag, hyper-aggressive workaholic, American psycho attitude is so entrenched in the finance mythos that you take up that identity just to fit in. You know you're just playing to an archetype. Obviously some assholes genuinely try to become the caricature, and some assholes were raised in a way that encouraged this unfortunate sort of evolution. But most people in finance acknowledge the laugh out louds of how not baller finance often is. If you look at email chains going around the floor, you will find endless repeats of self-deprecating jokes, speaking to the reality behind the ego. The 10,000th picture of an Excel model next to 3 Diet Cokes at 3 AM on a Saturday, captioned with IBD, living the dream, models and bottles all night, is not funny, but pretty much sums up the finance ego. Finance egos are full of shit, but at least most of them know it. Long story short, crazy egos in both startups and finance. Most finance assholes don't really buy their own shit, and usually do actually have at least the minimal amount of technical and professional competence to handle the money they oversee. Most startup assholes are full of shit, breathe, eat and live their shit, and are painfully, shockingly, tear-jerkingly, incompetent with capital. As Navy enlisted, I can confirm that Navy pilots can be arrogant douchebags. It's usually the fighter pilots that are that way. One of the most irritating encounter I had with one was on the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Was waiting in a long line to simply carry my tray and silverware to the scullery, where dishes are washed, and I feel someone nudge me from behind. I ignore it, but I get nudged again, knowing full well the idiot behind me wants to move when I can't. I turn around saying, "Do you fucking mind?" Before seeing the insignia, it was a lieutenant. that was a pilot with one of the fighter squadrons. Preparing for the worst, I simply got a nasty look, which is lucky, because I very well could have gotten in a ton of shit for disrespecting an officer. I will say though, any aviation officer worth their salt would remind the pilots that guys like me who work in aviation maintenance are the reason their birds are able to fly. Artists, or better, those who make other call them artists, are so full of shit that I feel second-hand shame. Lately, I've been really fed up with all the 20-somethings on my Facebook feed that call themselves photographers. Taking pictures with a decent camera to call yourself an artist is like the equivalent of learning chords on a guitar to call yourself a musician. Only everyone knows how easy basic guitar is. I mean, that's not to bash people that are genuinely devoted to the craft. Just like there are amazing guitarists, there are also amazing photographers. But Jesus Christ, I could drop a couple hundred on a DSLR and put a watermark with my name on the bottom too. Security. I worked security at a water park with a bunch of guys that thought they were FBI agents. I am a security guard. There are two types of security guards: the kind that thinks they're Secret Service, yell at people constantly, and take their job way too seriously, and the lazy warm body, who just shows up, does the bare minimum, and gets paid for it. I'm sorry, but volunteer firefighters, mainly in rural areas, they let everyone know they're a hero as soon as they open their mouths and display it on their shirts, bumper stickers, etc. I can understand pride in something, especially as a volunteer, but acting like you're part of the New York Fire Department during 9/11 is silly. The cat in the tree almost isn't a joke. I know a guy whose district has black shirts with white print for the logo. He sharpied out the volunteer part on all his shirts. The fashion industry is full of people with their heads up their asses. Generally there are two types of people there: those who are in it for the art, and those who are in it for the fashion. The artistic ones, the designers with a vision, who express themselves through design, are always pleasant and insightful, and amazing to talk to. Come to think of it, a lot of the models are pretty down to earth as well. It's a good way to make money, and the stuff you get to do is pretty cool. However, there are many who have had their egos so inflated that any of their interactions are completely superficial. I come from a city where the fashion industry is still relatively small, so most of the events are the same couple hundred people: bloggers, stylists, models, etc. And boy, do they think they're hot shit. They're all trying to fit into this glamorous ideology, when really they're just a group of people with expensive clothes who have grouped together. So yeah, fashion, edit, the devil wears Prada, is way too accurate to what the fashion industry is actually like. You can be nice, but you'll never make it big being nice. Consultants. The whole profession is to make the client believe that you know more than them about whatever their business is. This carries over to your coworkers and boss. Usually, consultants are full of shit. I work for a very, very large company as a consultant. The whole point is that I know more about a certain subject that most clients do, and have the resources to look up the questions. If I don't know the answer, it may sound egotistical, but that's the whole point of a consultant. Radio. Talk radio is clearly all blowhards, but even FM radio DJs are mostly phonies and attention whores these days. Most of the true believe-in music fans have either left the business or do it part-time as their fun job. Old radio vet here can confirm. Back when I was still in the game, I noticed that the ones with the worst egos were the small, medium market people. Bitter, angry jocks, jealous of anyone else above them. I was at a morning show conference once, hanging out with these guys. I was in a medium market at the time, and was getting sick of their bitching, so I went over and introduced myself to a group of the major market guys. Night and day difference. Not only did they accept me right away, but I got business cards, phone numbers, and invited to hang out for the next couple days. Generally speaking, the most successful ones were the best people. That's changed. I could go on, but yeah, lots of egos, especially in talk. I work in project management, and have never seen more bloated egos than the QA department. Mind you, I was in QA for a good 10 years, so this is also me we're talking about. I think one of the big issues with QAs is that as the gatekeepers of quality product, in software at least, you feel a sense of responsibility when something slips through, but you don't have to fix it, because that's not your expertise. Over time, you feel like you can tell the dev team exactly what is wrong, and how to fix it, because you've become so intimate with the product, and the users of course. Naturally, this was me. For many years I started with testing functionality, and when functionality was right, I started looking for flaws elsewhere. Eventually it became a game. Dev team got really good, they cracked down on bugs before I got a chance to look at it, and so my bug reports became more sparse. Sometimes I'd happily tell my supervisor that I didn't see any major flaws, and he'd say good, but are you looking hard enough? So eventually I started pointing out usability flaws because clearly I am the user and know what's best. Fonts were changed on demand, colors, shapes, wording, and before you know it I was telling developers their feature was inconsistent, and I had plenty of examples. Rationale be damned. I needed to create bug reports. This feeling of power went straight to my head. The developers weren't building their vision, they were building mine, and it was more apparent when I became lead QA. It wasn't until I joined project management that I noticed QAs were dictating every aspect about the product. With that out of the way, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want more content to keep appearing in your subscription box. Thanks for watching, and until next time.